So not too long ago, I was chatting with a buddy of mine who's a great photographer, and we came onto the topic of creativity and whether one-click presets and profiles are killers of creativity. And so his opinion was pretty black and white in terms of he is not a fan of profiles or presets. He believes that that is kind of the murder weapon of creativity. And so I thought that'd make for a good video because I'm actually a fan of profiles, and I think they fit into a photographer's toolkit when used correctly in the right way. And so that's what this video is all about. Welcome everyone, Brian Matiash here. And so this video is all about Adobe Creative Profiles. Now, there are differences between presets and profiles, and I'll touch on that in a bit. But my point here is I want to talk about why profiles can actually be helpful for a photographer when used properly. Like I said, I use profiles all the time. I actually use profiles on my video. The state of the video coming out of the camera is actually very different. But then I add a LUT to color grade it, and then I add another LUT to stylize it a bit, and it just works out for me. So the same thing goes with my photos. Now, back in April of 2018, Adobe made an update to Lightroom and Classic and Camera Raw by introducing profiles, and they're actually really powerful. There are, like I said, some key differences between presets that we've been used to for years in Lightroom and profiles. But with profiles, one of the best things about them is that you can build them off of lookup tables, which photographers and videographers have been using for years to color grade their footage. But the biggest problem that I see with how photographers approach their use of creative profiles is that they don't treat it the way I think they should treat it. I see profiles as a garnish or an accent ingredient. When you have a photo, there is a whole list of things that you do. Some of the things have to be done in the right order, otherwise the end result is pretty terrible. Like with cooking, photography has certain base ingredients that go in first, followed by other ingredients, and then maybe a garnish or an accent ingredient to bring out those flavors, and you have a nice ensemble cast at the end. And when done right, the end result is a feast, either for your mouth with food or for your eyes with a photo. And so I really do think that there is a certain way that you should approach using one-click profiles and presets. And I've got 3 tips with 3 photos that we're gonna look at in a second. But before we do, in this demo, I'm gonna be using profiles from a pack that I'm giving away for free. It's called the Nature Tones Profile Pack. You can go ahead and click the link in the description and fill out the form, and you can download them for free so you can follow along with your own photos and see how these profiles impact your own photography. All right, so let's kick things off in Lightroom. And as you can see, I've got 3 very distinct nature photos. We've got one taken in a forest with redwoods. We've got a grossly color casted waterfall, and then we've got this desert scene. And I was very deliberate in choosing 3 different environments with my landscape photos. So you can see how important it is to really be deliberate with choosing the right profile for the right type of photo. And so I mentioned that there are 3 tips in this video. So let's start with the first one. And that is, do not rely on profiles or presets as a crutch to fix your photo or to stylize your photo. It's on you to know how to use the editing tools in Lightroom and in Photoshop so that you get your photo looking good, and then the profile is used again as an accent or a garnish. So what I mean by that is, let's take this photo here again. We'll go into the develop module, and then, without doing anything to fix the photo or correct the tone and color, you just go ahead and you find like a profile and it's like, oh, that's good. Cool, I'm done. That doesn't work. That should not be your workflow. You have to do the work to your photo first. Fix it, correct it, and then go on. So again, not using the preset or profile as a crutch is probably the most important thing that I can start with. So what I mean by that is, let's undo here, and I'll go ahead and just add some quick corrections. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Let's drop the highlights. Let's bring the white point down a little bit. This isn't so much an editing tutorial, but I just want to show you how I'm getting the image here kind of at the right place. We can try and kind of warm it up just a tiny bit. And this is a good starting point for the photo. Highlights are blown out because you've got a really bright spot there from the sun. I'm not worried about it. But overall, I can see tone is looking good on the histogram. I can actually open up the shadows probably a bit more. But that's looking good. Everything here is fine. Now I can go ahead and, if I want to, add a profile or preset. And for the purposes of this photo, I want to show you the differences between profiles and presets and why I am a huge fan of profiles. I don't use presets anymore. pretty much never. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but for my own workflow, here's why I like profiles over presets. You see I've got my sliders here. Now, a preset, you have to think of it as kind of like a snapshot of whatever the sliders are here in the develop module. If you save that as a preset, the state of those sliders are what's going to apply when you add that preset. And you can choose, if you make only changes to the basic panel here and you don't do anything to the rest of the panels, then when you save that preset, only those sliders will be recorded. So watch, if I go here to say soft mist and I click it, you see how the sliders changed? So all that work that I did, it was undone, because the preset changes those sliders. Not a fan of that. There are certain kind of preset packs that I know people sell where they have batches of presets. Like these presets in the pack will only affect the basic sliders, and then onto the effects and to sharpening, etc. So you can kind of apply the presets in different stages, but I'm not personally a fan of that. So here, again, this is the image corrected, and I'll go ahead to the profiles, which is designated by this little thumbnail here with 4 little rectangles. Click on it. There are the nature tone presets. Hovering over them shows a preview of them. And what I'm going to do, typically the way I work is I hover over them really quickly, and if any one of them jumps at me, and I think this one does, I click on it. Now, if we go back really quickly, let's close the profile browser, you'll see that none of my sliders changed here, which is what I love. But like any slider, typically the default state is usually too much. Sometimes it's too little, but it's usually too much. Fortunately, and also unlike presets, with profiles, you actually have this amount slider, so you can control the presence or the strength of that particular profile. And like with any slider, I usually just go to the left where there's nothing, to the right. And this is unique with profiles, is that Adobe allows you to go to double whatever the full strength is. Now, it's also important to know that as a profile creator, I can control what that 200 actually means. So I could say that, yes, at 100%, that is 100, that's full strength. But I can say that 100, or that 200% rather, is only actually 125% strength. But in this case, I did it to 200 because I want you to download this profile pack for free, and I want you to see what it means to go to a full 200%. But again, I'm going to go to 0, and I'm going to bring this up really slowly to about maybe right around here. And you can see, let's just bring it to 0 so that there's nothing, and then bring it back to where it is. It's a super, it's not much. And that's why I like using profiles specifically, is because I can find a particular look that I like and just, add just a little bit of it. I don't have to overpower the viewer, and I'm not using it as a crutch, which again is the point here, is I'm not relying on this. It's just a nice accent. It just brings out what I already did to the photo. All right, let's move on to the second image here. And with that, the second tip for this video, and that is making sure that you use the profile in the right order of your editing workflow. Again, typically when you start cooking something, you start with some base ingredients. You have your water or your salt and your pepper, and maybe towards the end, you start adding a little bit of oregano or parsley or cumin, and you use it in the right amount. But what's important is that you want to put that stuff in the right order. Otherwise, it might not work. And here, I'm going to use this photo as an example. So let's just say we'll start on a decent footing. This was using a filter that clearly added a color cast. So let's just, before we do anything, let's just kind of get a white balance. So there, now we're looking good with a more proper white balance. Now let's just say that we decided not to fix the photo first, which in my opinion is the first thing you should do. Let's say instead of correcting using the basic sliders to get proper tone and color, we go straight to the profiles. Why not? Well, as you can see here, I mean, yeah, there's some interesting looking results, but for the most part, it's just really, really heavy handed. Even if we selected one like, this Nature Tones 4 and we bring it down to 0, watch how quickly the shadows get crushed even more. So, that's not something that I think is, it's a good idea to do. my personal recommendation is to go ahead and the very first thing you should do with your photo is to fix it. So that could be things like maybe going to the lens correction and adding that profile if you want. Maybe, you want to go to crop here and just recompose. This is the cropping is not the biggest deal, but just things like geometry, cropping, and then most importantly is color and tone. So, opening up tone a little bit, let's kind of add a little bit more or drop highlights a little bit and open up the shadows, open up the black point and add a little bit of contrast. Pretty simple. Now notice I'm stopping here basically. I'm not really adding anything else other than maybe a little bit of vibrance, but I'm not going to add anything under the presence. So I'm not doing texture, clarity, or dehaze. And I'm not adding sharpening or a vignette. That comes later. But now I'm at a point where, okay, yeah, like this is looking pretty good. Tone-wise, actually, let's drop those highlights a little bit more. Getting a bit too hot. Okay, that's good. But now I can go ahead to the profile browser and you can see how, because I made those changes, the preview's updated right away, which is great. And so again, I'll hover over these, finding one that I like. And I actually like this one here, but again, really, really strong at 100%. So let's bring that down to 0. And see, all I'm doing is just adding it as kind of like a garnish right around there. And now with that profile applied, I can go ahead and add, say, a little bit of clarity, maybe a little bit of texture, just a tiny bit. And if I want, I can now adjust the tone curve. And that's an important point. The reason why I don't use the tone curve before the profile is because a lot of times profiles are adjusting the tone curve based on how it was built. You just don't see it necessarily. Again, profiles are based off of LUTs or lookup tables. And one of the most common things that people do when they build their own LUT is they adjust the tone curve. So if I were to go ahead here and add, say, an S curve in advance, for all I know, the profile can also be adding an S curve, which would just kind of compound things. So again, do your basic stuff and then add the profile and then start messing with things like the tone curve. That's how I found the right order to be. But in this case, I don't think those tone curve edits are doing anything. Actually, a little bit more of the highlight. That looked good. But other than that, I don't want to touch the shadows too much. And now I can go ahead and if I wanted to add a little bit of a color grade here, I could go and just, bring that, maybe add a little bit of a cool tone to the shadows. Maybe open the shadows up to make them a little bit more blue and add maybe some warmth to the midtones. It's just something, just a tiny bit, just like that. And then I can go ahead also and reevaluate the strength of that profile. Maybe I want to add a little bit more now, something like that. You can do that by all means. And then finally, of course, go ahead and we'll add the post-crop vignette. So just a tiny bit here, bring it more to the center and add a little bit of a feather. And then, of course, add a little bit of sharpening. And that's looking good. All right, let's move on to the third and final tip, which is falling into this trap of using the same profile over and over. And the reason why I am bringing this up is because I fell into this trap myself for a long time. I happened to build this one profile in another profile pack that I sell on my site. And in my opinion, this is the greatest profile. And I'm not just saying it because I built it. I just loved the way it looked on all of my photos. So I was breaking my own rules. And what happened was all of my photos started to look the same. And that might be okay with you, but that's not okay with me. I'm not saying that I want to have 100 different looks, but what I don't want is to have one look across the board with my portfolio of photos. And so that's why I think it's great to experiment with different profile packs. Again, you can download this one for free. Just click on the link in the description, but see what works for you. And if there is one that you really like, that's great. But make sure you try different things. There are profile packs that come with Adobe, and there are plenty of profile packs that other photographers like myself either give away for free or sell if it's a premium pack. So let's go with this photo, this final photo here. It's a desert shot. And like before, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to start fixing things. And I'm actually going to close the left column here. So we'll go ahead, let's go ahead and open up the exposure a bit. Again, like before, maybe drop the white point, drop the highlights. You can see for the most part, fixing tone typically involves the same steps because there are common issues with tone that any photographer with any camera experiences. So I'm going here, I'm trying to get basically the foreground looking good. I lost the sky, but that's not a problem because I'm just going to take my graduated filter. Let's just create a filter right around here. And we'll go ahead, we'll drop the highlights a bit. Let's drop the exposure to bring back some of that definition and detail. I don't want to drop the white point too much because you can see how we're starting to get kind of gray, muddy highlights. I don't want that. I just kind of want to recover them just a little bit. And notice how I am not doing anything with dehaze. Like I would love to do dehaze right now, but tip number 2 is do things in the right order. And right now that is not the right order. What I will do though is I will take this brush here and click on erase and just, I don't want that filter, that graduated filter to darken the foreground. That defeats the purpose. I just want to bring out some of the detail in the sky, which I did. So that's looking good here. Now, again, it's time we can add a profile. So I'm going to click on the profile browser here and let's go ahead. Now in the first image, I used Nature Tones 1. In the second image, I used Nature Tones 4. So again, tip number 3 is don't get stuck with the same profile. Just experiment. So I'm going to hover over here on the different profiles. And yeah, 3. I like 3 a lot. So I'm going to click on it. And what I'm going to do is, just like before, let's go to 0 and kind of go out. And you know what? Actually, this is looking good even past 100%. So right around 121. I'm not saying you always have to be below 100% on the slider. Most of the times you do end up getting yourself down into the 20, 30, 40%. But sometimes if a profile is very subtle, you won't really get that look until over 100%. And that's where it's great. Why I like the profiles is that I can go above 100%. So this looks good. I'm going to close it out over here. Now I can go ahead. I actually want to warm the image up just a tiny bit. Just that's a little bit there. And then I can go to my target adjustment tools here under the hue, saturation, luminance section. I'll start by adjusting the hue of the blue somewhere around there. I'm also going to add saturation to the blue. So right around there. And let's see if I darken blue just a tiny bit because I want to make it look like I used a polarizer, which I think I did, but it looks like the sun was over here and polarizers are most effective at 90-degree angles to the sun. But all in all, that's looking really good. Now I can close out. And remember, I haven't done anything yet with any of the presence sliders. So, adding a tiny bit of texture and clarity. Now I can also add dehaze. And it works. It actually looks really good globally instead of just on that filter. I could have gone back to the filter over here and added the dehaze, but I like the way it looked globally, so I'm cool with that. And let's just add a little bit of vibrance. I don't really need to do anything with the tone curve here because I'm happy with the layout. You can see how the black point is brought out, and that means that you're adding some gray into the shadows. Typically, you do that with the tone curve, and you'll find that happens a lot with profiles, which again is why I don't adjust the tone curve until I add the profile, because in this case here, I can tell just by looking at the histogram that the profile I applied, also I built the profile, so I know what I did. But what I did was I added some gray, and the way you do that is for example here in this tone curve, I would take a point here in the shadows area, and then I would take my black point, and you can kind of start to see that. You see how that gray is coming in? Now, obviously that's terrible, but I did it in a very subtle way with the profile. And last but not least, maybe just a tiny bit of blue in the shadows, maybe open up the shadows with a little bit of blue. And we can go ahead, let's add some sharpening. Let's remove the sharpening from areas we don't need it or want it. And then finally, just a tiny bit of a feathered vignette. Maybe that's a bit too strong, but that's looking good. So that I think is looking pretty cool. And again, the base style here is that profile. So there you have it. Those are my 3 tips of how to effectively use creative profiles in Adobe Lightroom and Lightroom Classic and Camera Raw. The other nice thing about these profiles is that they sync across all of the devices that you're logged into with your Adobe ID. So if you want to edit, say, a photo on your phone and you imported a profile pack like Nature Tones, they'll be available on your phone or your tablet and your computers, which I think is awesome. And to continue the video watching journey, just click right here to see another video where I walk through editing a photo using one of the profiles in the Nature Tones profile pack, which, one more time, just click on the link in the description to download it for free. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next video.